Hello, my name is Sister Mary Fitzgerald. I'm a school sister of Notre Dame, and I've been an educator all my life. I spent most of my years teaching in high schools, 6 years in elementary schools, and then in high schools, math and religion, and then 23 years as an administrator. The topic of equity in Catholic education is a very important one to me. I think it's at the heart of our Catholic identity, and it's what we need to be doing in all of our schools. We need to work for it. We need to model it. We live in a crazy world, and we need to bring that world some kind of sanity. So I'd like to share some thoughts with you this evening, and hopefully they will be meaningful for you. The title of the presentation is Equity, a New Face for a New Era in Catholic Schools. First, we should take a quick look at where we've been. What about our origin as Catholic schools? In the mid-19th century, many of us who are parts of religious communities know that our sisters or our brothers or our priests came from Europe to the United States to assist with an immigrant population. They came here to continue the development of the students of European descent in faith, in spirituality, and Catholic practice, as well as for the development of the students to be competent in the academic arena and lifelong learners. The bishops in Europe were actually looking for women and men religious in Europe to come to the United States because they knew that many of their flock had emigrated to the United States and needed assistance in maintaining their faith and with their educations. My own community, the School Sisters of Notre Dame, comes from two sources, really. We had a birth in France with Alice Leclerc and Peter Fourier. Alice Leclerc and Peter Fourier in 1597 founded the canonesses of St. Augustine of the Congregation of Notre Dame. And they began teaching, but the rules were so strict that women had to be in monasteries. Peter and Alex really wanted the teachers to be freer, but they weren't able to be because of the societal constraints in which they found themselves. But this was a whole period of political upheaval in Europe, and many people were poverty-stricken. It wasn't terribly unlike our own. We're suffering terribly as a result of the pandemic, and many of our people are in need of economic assistance as well as quality education. The other problems that existed were that young women were not getting any kind of education. The education was given to the boys because they were considered to be the ones that needed the education, and the girls were only going to be mothers. What an insult, huh? Only going to be mothers, one of the most important roles in all of society. Our own foundress, Teresa Gerhardinger, felt that that was all the more reason why the girls should be educated, because they were going to be the primary and first educators of their children. But France at this period in time, 1597, was in political turmoil. So was Germany. Our foundress, Blessed Teresa, was very interested in education in the German sense. The word is Erziehung, and it means not just knowledge dumped into a person's head, but also character formation. So she was really an innovative leader and educator, and she refounded the School Sisters of Notre Dame in 1833 because they had been suppressed. The canonesses of Notre Dame had been suppressed by the Napoleonic Wars. Her belief was that education should be person-centered, development-focused, spiritually grounded, service-oriented, and community-based. So she really believed in transforming the world through education, which is the motto that we use even to this day. Catholic education expanded quickly in the United States when the sisters and brothers came from Europe to the US. But what we also found as they began their work in the middle of the 19th century was that there was an atmosphere that was white, Anglo-Saxon, and Protestant that prevailed in the country here. So the era of Catholic schools dates back to 1884, when the bishops, responding to complaints about this Protestant domination of the public schools, ordered every parish to build a school. And waves of the mostly poor immigrant children were educated at these schools. And that did engender a backlash. And if you want to read more about that, this is a segment from an article that can be found in the New York Times. How did we move from this WASP mentality to inclusion? We began our parish schools in the United States because we feared the domination. We recognized by the end of the 19th century the need for systemic change in education, not just in individual parishes, but throughout the country. So from 1884 to the present, there have been significant changes in Catholic education in the United States as we see it today. You baby boomers may remember years in which you were educated in Catholic schools by teachers who were all brothers or sisters or priests, or mostly all brothers or sisters or priests. And these teachers really received very little pay for their services. They were members of a community and they were able to survive quite well. They were able to eat, and doctors were very good to us. There were all kinds of people who were supporting us in this, but there was not much pay coming to the religious communities. In some dioceses, like Philadelphia, the parishes contributed significantly to the Catholic school education. So there was little to no tuition in these places. The Catholic Church at that time was centered on the needs of its own people. So in a sense, we were navel-gazing. In most cases, our Catholic schools became outstanding educational facilities, and we should be very proud of that reality. Vatican Council II came along and called us to be church in the absolute truest sense. And this meant that we had to stop the navel-gazing and reach out in collaboration with all those whom we had been considering the opponents. With more opportunities for service in the church, fewer women and men were choosing to join religious communities. There were other ways to serve in our church, besides as brothers and sisters and priests. More lay teachers needed to be hired in the schools, and the tuition had to begin to rise. We also adopted certification standards for our teachers and administrators, and our schools grew in importance. We developed our national standards and benchmarks for effective elementary and secondary schools. Hopefully, we're all familiar with that wonderful document and very grateful to the people who put it together. The point that I think we need to bear in mind is we had huge challenges in the 19th century and into the early 20th century for Catholic education, but we did it. We rose to the occasion. We educated all those immigrants to the United States, and we changed and adapted to be more collaborative, inclusive, and welcoming of other people. Our challenge today is slightly different. We still have immigrants coming to our southern border, and certainly to our other borders from other countries of the world, but our heavy immigration right now is from Mexico, Central and South America. But our huge challenge today, I believe, in our Catholic schools is equity. And that's why I gave this presentation the topic of equity. This little picture describes really, really well the difference between equality, equity, and justice. Equality, we give everybody the same thing, so each person gets the same box, but this little guy still can't see over the fence. And this little guy is practically, his chin is up to it. It's only the tall one who's able to see well. Equity means we give them what they need to succeed in this. And so the little guy needs 2 boxes, the middle one needs only 1, and the tall one needs none. Justice means we take away the barrier and we try to make things much more available to everyone. And the barrier here was obviously this wooden fence. If the wooden fence hadn't been there, they all could have seen the baseball game through a type of linked fence. And so justice causes us to take a look at what's really causing the inability of people to advance. Here's a little segment from Charles Barkley. But I'm sorry, it doesn't seem to be turning on, but you can go to YouTube, and if you type in equity and look for Charles Barkley, you will find this. It's a very short segment, and Charles Barkley is discussing racism in particular in the United States. And he states very openly that he has experienced racism in his own life, but not to the same extent that the men and women who came before him experienced it. It's a very lovely little segment, and I think you would enjoy it. We need to develop in our nation and in our schools the sense of civil discourse. We need to rediscover that. And what do we mean by civil discourse? Civil discourse is not controlling the speech of another, but modeling the discourse we desire. We all want people to listen to us. So in a civil discourse, we listen to others. The best teaching method for civil discourse is modeling. So if we as teachers can model civil discourse in our classrooms, then our students will pick it up and our students will begin to emulate it. The question behind civil discourse is, how do we really listen? And some people talk about, do we listen with our answer running? And by that, they mean when someone says something to us and we don't agree with what the person is saying, as the person is talking, in the back of our minds, are we planning out what we're going to say next? We know how we're going to respond to that person, right? We're going to say this, that, and the other thing. That's referred to as listening with our answer running. And the cue to civil discourse is to truly listen, to listen with the heart, to stop our mind from racing ahead, and to really attend our entire body to listening, to hearing it, to taking it into ourselves, to cherishing it in our hearts. So can we hold one another's thought reverently in front of us, even if we have strong feelings to the contrary? It's almost like holding something out. We pick something up and we hold it out in front of us, and we don't pass judgment on it. We just look at it and observe it, or listen to it and observe it. Does this human person have a message to bring? Do I understand the strong feelings the person may have? In mutual responsibility, we trust one another, presuming the goodwill of each other. And I think we've lost this fine art in our society today. We as Catholics believe that this is important to us. We are mutually responsible, and we do trust each other, or at least we should. And we should presume the goodwill of each other. So if we can live our Catholic identity in this way, we can model civil discourse. Of course, the bottom line is, how do we say the things that we need to say? We don't want to go after each other the way these two cartoon characters are. So if we are upset about something or we don't know what's going on, if we're looking for some input, we might begin with, it seems as if you are upset about this, or you are trying to say such and such. Is that how you see it? So we give the person a lead in without interpreting what they're saying, giving them the opportunity to explain what they want to say. If we want to affirm the speaker, we might say something like, you know, it's obvious how much you care about this issue, and I really respect that in you. If we disagree, if we feel attacked, or we think what was said does not further the discussion, we might say, I'm having a little problem getting my hands around the idea. Can you help me by clarifying a little bit? If we assume the problem rather than pushing the problem onto the person who's speaking with us, then the person who's speaking with us feels more open towards us and more willing to try to help us to understand what he or she is trying to say. And these are all very, very simple ways that we can build civil discourse in our own conversations. Some ideas for classrooms and meetings. When in our classrooms, we can set up diverse groupings. We can explain the process this way. Only one person speaks at a time. While a person is speaking, each other group member is listening carefully. Each idea is held objectively without judgment. Responses begin with appreciation. Thank you. After someone has spoken, we say, thank you, Johnny, for sharing that. That was very good, and we really appreciate that. If there is a question, it's phrased as such and not as a judgment. For example, I want to better understand your point. Can you clarify what you mean by that? You know, we would never say something like, well, that wasn't a good answer. We want to encourage the person to stay in dialogue, to remain in dialogue. Our world is absolutely full of inequity. And there's also, besides racism, which we touched upon just as a topic, and to mention a topic earlier, there's also all kinds of economic injustice. What about those who fall through the cracks, especially in Catholic education? They're not poor enough to receive financial aid, and yet they're not rich enough to be able to make the choice for Catholic schools. There are two sites here that you might want to look to further your own exploration of that question. If you have the opportunity to discuss with your faculty, I'm including a whole series of handouts, and I would encourage you to use them. There are handouts on civil dialogue, the reality of white privilege, the challenge today to discuss how you can address this issue effectively in your school. How can you open the minds of students to inclusivity? How can you confront bias in parents in your community? How often do we find that the students are reflecting what their parents truly believe? So we also need to be able to reach our parents, and that's a great discussion to have with our faculties. The reality of the underserved, some of the people who need us the most in our Catholic schools are people of low to no income. Some of them are homeless. Many of their parents are jobless. Some of their families have had inferior education. And unfortunately, in many circumstances, they have little to no support from a church. What can we do to assist them? When we came here from Europe in the mid-19th century, we were teaching children who had no money to give us, families who had no money to give us. We figured out a way to do it. And we need to be able to figure out a way today to serve the underserved in our Catholic schools. What can we do? Well, the reality is we've lost a lot of enrollment in our Catholic schools, and that's documented by NCEA. We have closed schools in our poorest urban and rural regions, where the people are the poorest. Is there a way we can influence leaders and positions to help us? Can we market our effectiveness with the underserved in a way that may influence people of means to assist us? We need help from someone, that's for sure. What is working and what more can we do? Models like the Nativity model and the Cristo Rey schools function with support from business leaders. What resources are available in your area where you have your Catholic school? It's not enough to maintain the status quo. Injustice in our gospel call to be the people of Jesus, we need to be concerned about equity. We need to be concerned about the underserved. If we are in schools in affluent areas, how do we enable students to experience the needs of the underserved so that students understand what the underserved need? There's nothing wrong with having schools in affluent areas, certainly. But we do also have a mission to the underserved. So how do we bring the two together? Catholic schools should be leading the charge in establishing equity. It is at the heart of our identity as followers of Jesus. The University of South Florida is offering a free, and we like that word, don't we? 100% online workshop, which results in a certificate. The only difficulty is that the first session begins on March 24th. So I will ask NCEA to make this form available to you ahead of time in case anyone is interested in signing up for it. Sister Rosemary Nassif from Loyola Marymount University facilitated a great workshop on Dr. King Day, January 18th. Dr. Brandy Odom Lucas gave an excellent presentation, and her summary on equity in the schools is included in the attachments that you will receive for your use in your dialogues with your faculty and staff. My hope is that something in our reflection today was helpful to you for your ministry. Equity is the new challenge facing us, educators. How are we teaching civil discourse, conflict management, but more importantly, how are we teaching respect for all of God's creation? Thank you very much. I appreciate your taking part in this presentation, and I hope the supports, the aids are of use to you.